Good afternoon. Thank you for joining this exciting webinar, Omnichannel Supply-Chain Management, The New Frontier, presented by John Brandt, CEO of the MPI Group. For the remainder of this broadcast, you are all in listen-only mode. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session, and Carolyn Lawrence, APICS Director of Corporate Member Engagement, will facilitate questions at that time. Please use the questions feature in the GoToWebinar to type in your questions at any time during this presentation. Also note that this webinar will be recorded and you will be sent a link to the recording after the presentation. Now allow me to introduce our presenter, Mr. John Brandt. John is the CEO and founder of the MPI Group and has devoted more than 2 decades to studying leadership in effective, purpose-driven organizations. As an expert on how companies can adapt themselves to the realities of new markets, new corporate structures, and new customer expectations, John is an accomplished management innovator and an internationally recognized expert on manufacturing, supply chain management, and technology. Before founding the MPI Group in 2003, John followed a unique career path combining 2 decades of experience in marketing, management, and consulting with a passion for journalism that has earned him more than 20 awards for reporting, writing, and editing. He was the publisher and editor-in-chief of Industry Week magazine, which garnered more than 70 editorial awards for excellence and doubled its revenues under his leadership. Additionally, John served as the president, publisher, and editorial director of the Chief Executive Group, publisher of Chief Executive, where his leadership transformed the magazine into one of publishing's most surprising comebacks. A recipient of the prestigious Neal Award in 1998, John has also served as a Neal Awards judge. In addition, he has served as a member of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership National Advisory Board, judge for the National Association of Manufacturers Awards for Workforce Excellence, board member of the Manufacturing Advocacy and Growth Network, co-chaired the Northeast Ohio Product Innovation Initiative, is an advisory board member of both SupplierInsight.com and Kentool Manufacturing, is a director of the Work in Northeast Ohio Council and president of the Press Club of Cleveland. John is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Case Western Reserve University, where he received the James Dysart McGee Award in Economics. Please welcome with me, Mr. John Brandt.
Hey, Carolyn, thank you very much, and thanks for everybody who has joined us today. Appreciate it. We're going to talk about some interesting, cool stuff. And in particular, what we're going to talk about is omnichannel supply chain management, the new frontier, what we're all wrestling with as we manage our supply chains. More specifically, what I want to do is share with you some research that APICS did in conjunction with MPI on supply chain performance and how things are working right now and maybe how things aren't working quite so well in dealing with omnichannel issues. So given that, let's get started. Today we're going to talk about the supply chain survey itself, what we were looking at. We're going to talk about just a little bit, very briefly, about who participated. We're going to talk then about some of the specific data that we got out of this, relating to company operations, supply chain management and performance, operations and supply chain costs, supply chain information, and then just focus in on maybe several key takeaways that everybody on this call may want to take a look at within their own companies or their own supply chains to optimize performance. So what is the survey? Well, this was what is going on right now. We see incredible opportunities for everybody managing supply chains, but also especially with omni-channel opportunities. What we're seeing now is that people want to have opportunities to buy and have things shipped to them in a variety of ways. And we're seeing new business models. We're seeing new technologies being rolled out. We're seeing a lot of companies starting to earn new revenues and new profits. That's terrific. At the same time, this is really, really complex stuff, and it's made even more complex by some of the issues that people managing the supply chains around omnichannel are seeing. Issues like lagging innovations in terms of process. We're seeing legacy supply chain structures that maybe aren't working as well, and we're seeing some trade-offs between investments. You know, how much do we put in now? How much do we put in later? What is the timeline for us to evolve toward a true omni-channel supply chain? So let's talk about it. What is the omni-channel opportunity? Global retail e-commerce sales are expected to reach $4.5 trillion US by 2021. Even last year, we saw business to consumer e-commerce sales at about 2.3 trillion. What's amazing is that a lot of people think of omnichannel, or they think of this as sort of a consumer-based phenomenon. What we're seeing is that the B2B component, business to business e-commerce, is even bigger. Last year was 7.7 trillion. And what's amazing about this is that even as this is just happening, whether we want it to happen or not for our particular firms, a lot of us are uncertain about what to do. There was a study done among senior CPG executives in Europe that already have, now remember, these are people who already have omni-channel efforts at their company, and they were asked, are you on the right track? And less than a quarter of them said, yeah, we're on the right track. The other ones were like, we're not quite sure, we're doing the right stuff. And when they ask them, what is the issue? What is the issue around omnichannel? Is it around sales, retail, whatever? It is around, do we have the right next generation supply chain capabilities? So let's be clear about what we're talking about here. We're talking about omnichannel versus multi-channel. Many of us have had multi-channel structures and supply chains before, where we were selling into different channels. Omnichannel is different than multi-channel in that there are multiple channels, but the channels cross over. Somebody may want to buy it in online or mobilely, but pick it up at a store. They might want to get information at a store, buy it online. The channels cross one another. And that makes the sales component, but also the supply chain component, much more complicated. And there's a lot of different models out there right now. When we look at Walmart, for example, Walmart has come up with a pay with cash option. They have a number of customers who don't have debit cards, don't have credit cards, but still want to shop online. So they can shop online, select something, then they can go to the store and pay cash and pick it up. Staples pushing very hard on a buy online model and then pick it up in the store, in part because they want to get you to the store, because in the stores they have kiosks that have access to more than 100,000 items throughout their system. Obviously not in that one store, but access to that there where they can do an additional sale. We're seeing some interesting experiments right now. Tesco has opened a virtual grocery store in a South Korean subway station. And what you do there is you've got this big, digital display that looks like a supermarket shelf. You can take a look at it, and you use QR codes on your smartphones from a digital display to select what you want. Those groceries are delivered to your home within a day. So in theory, what you can do is you can go and shop in the morning and perhaps have your groceries later that day or first thing the next morning, saving time, etc. There's a lot of different models out there, a lot of different options, and obviously all this complicates what it means to run a supply chain. So that is why APICS got very interested in saying, okay, let's take a look at supply chain performance. Just performance in general, but also performance on some of the characteristics that are going to be important to omnichannel. So given the fact that we were looking at all these areas, the objective was to develop a survey that would look at performance levels and figure out what some of the best practices are among people who are doing well with omnichannel. This was a very tightly scoped and created survey of North American business executives, but we had 204, and we're going to show you what we found. First of all, who responded? Well, most people, it was about half and half, whether people were responding for a business unit or for the entire company. These were companies that, in general, had a significant age of the company, have been around for a while. Majority were in the United States, but we had good percentages in both Canada and in Mexico. And again, I'm not going to read every chart on here because I really hate it when somebody does that on a presentation that I'm attending. I know that this presentation, the PowerPoint is going to be made available by Carolyn and others at APICS for you afterwards, so feel free to get that downloaded if you want to take a look at it. It was very important in doing this survey. We wanted to make sure we were talking to people who knew what they were talking about supply chain in their organizations. And so we had people who had at least some understanding. Most people had a good or deep understanding of their operations and supply chain at their firm, and mostly were managers, supervisors, vice presidents, or directors. Most of these organizations were manufacturers and represented a variety of products. You can take a look there. Biggest was industrial products, consumer packaged goods, electronics. And these were firms of scale. You've got the median annual revenue in millions. People were looking at close to 387 million this year. In terms of employees, median was 900 employees. So again, these are firms large enough to be pursuing omnichannel efforts. So What did we find out? Well, we're going to get there, but I want to talk first about when we talk about operations, when we think about omnichannel, why is it so hard? And it's hard for a variety of reasons. One of the things is that omnichannel, it requires a whole bunch of different departments to work together. It's not just manufacturing, operations, distribution, or supply chain. Marketing has to be involved. IT has to be involved in terms of big data. Finance has to be involved. Sales has to be involved to take a look at, make sure you're not poaching margins from one channel to another. Then beyond that, when an omnichannel strategy is created for an organization, what has to be thought through is who are the specific customers within each channel by segment, whether it's B2B, B2C, what are they looking for, and what are the value components that we need to do for them? That then leads to, how do we have a supply chain network that works? You know, are we running one center? Are we running regional centers? Where should this inventory live to satisfy these multiple channels? Once you get past that, then you have to think about, well, what new capabilities do we need? What technologies? Do we need big data? Do we need artificial intelligence? Do we need robotics? Do we need the Internet of Things? What are we going to put in? And then the biggest question of all comes in. This can be overwhelming if you try to do it all at once. So what happens is companies have to face the idea of what is the thing we do first and how do we roll this out over a multi-year period? So we wanted to find out what people are doing and what are they trying to do to make sure their performance in this realm is optimized. So we had, first of all, we said, to what extent are the following practices and programs in place? And you can see here, these are ranked by extensive use, some use on down. Safety, quality certifications, employee training, supply chain management were sort of the top ones. A number of the ones toward the bottom where they're not being as used are some things that you might think might be helpful if you were doing omnichannel, things like the Internet of Things or benchmarking other people or vendor managed inventory or total productive maintenance. A lot of things that we're going to talk about later that may be lagging among people who are trying to make this move. We ask what type of products are most likely to be made to stock, or we said, are you producing? And they're most likely to be made to stock or made to order. You can take a look at the numbers right there for yourself. And we found that most organizations are relatively quick in fulfilling orders and invoicing for them. The median time for to market, receipt of customer order to delivery of the product to the customer is about 12 days at the median. Time to invoice is 4 days at the median. We also wanted to find out, okay, how are people delivering now, even if they're just starting an omnichannel effort? And we found about 1/3 of organizations deliver directly to company warehouses. You can see some of the other percentages there. Manufacturers, 23%, wholesalers, distributors, 21%. And then we also ask for specific performances in terms of operational, stock availability rate, perfect order fulfillment, product returns, on-time delivery, et cetera. And these are respectable numbers. I wouldn't call them great numbers, but they are respectable numbers as we look at this. And again, give you a second to take a look at some of those. You can download it later. I would encourage you to compare these with the numbers you're looking at your firm. Remember, these are median numbers. These are not necessarily best performer numbers. We found that organizations are typically turning over their inventory 10 times a year at the median, and that obsolete inventory was about 5% of total inventory. We also found, we wanted to ask about, okay, so what type of customer service availability do you provide going into an omnichannel environment? And we found about 1/4 said that they are available 24/7. You've also got a huge chunk down there. You've got 5% who don't have, or you've got 1% with no customer service availability. I don't know how long those people will be in business going forward. You've got a number of other people who are just offering it during business hours. Vast majority of folks, over 92%, said that they were providing customer service internally. You had a small group, 8%, that were outsourcing it. We asked people to describe the talent in their organization. And what you find is that they are most likely to have strong operations talent and strong R&D talent. That's at the top there. Lower down on the list there were logistics, purchasing, procurement, human resources. The talent component is going to be really important going forward. It is really easy when we talk about omnichannel or next generation supply chains, whatever, to get focused in on the structure, to get focused in on the technology, the practices. The talent is really important because we're starting to see people, you know, as you go into this area, you have to start thinking of new and creative way to do things. For example, if you look at Amazon, Amazon knows that one of the most expensive things they can do is to have a stock out on their website and then people don't order. So to avoid stockouts, they've actually changed their receiving procedures. And what they do is when a truck comes in where they've got stuff, they just unload the goods ASAP, even if they're dumping them into a mixed bin, making sure that it is close to receiving, because what that does is allows them to scan it in, make sure that they're maintaining inventory in their system and on their website. By doing that, it does a couple things. First of all, obviously it makes picking much more complicated, but it allows them to make sure they're in stock. It allows them to reduce inventory levels and increases the speed of getting things out to customers. And that's just a very small example of some of the creative strategies that people are starting to explore to make omnichannel work. And it's going to be really important to do this because if you think about managing shipping and returns in a supply chain for an omnichannel strategy, you have so many ways you have to be able to deliver now. You have to be able to drop ship. You have click and collect where somebody, you know, somebody has ordered and you collect the money with a credit card and they come pick it up at your store or at your lights out store. Or reserve and collect where they click it there and they come and pay, like the Walmart option, or they deliver to a delivery locker. Or now we're seeing same day service, whether it's to a business or to a home, or we're even seeing it being delivered to the trunks of people's cars. So doing this requires having great talent on hand that can help you do this. It also requires having great talent on hand because we're focused today on the supply chain component, but the supply chain component isn't just getting the goods in and shipping the goods out. It is now focused on managing your partners, because when you have an omnichannel strategy, when you are working with a variety of people, all of a sudden your distributors and your partners have now become brand ambassadors for you. And if they do a bad job in representing your brand, the people aren't going to remember that it was the local person who did a bad job. They're going to remember your brand. So what that means is that we have to be starting to think about, with our talent, how do we train our partners? How do we train our distributors? What kind of content do we give them? What kind of processes can we create for them? Great example of this is a chemical manufacturer called Tennant. They make cleaning products and solutions, but they are really far ahead on the omni-channel B2B model here because they're offering a customized digital experience to their customers. They're using big data and analytics to figure out what segments are looking for what. And what they do is that based on when somebody comes in, they get a little bit of information. They give them access to targeted content. They put in strategically placed calls to action at every step along the purchase or specification process. And then they make sure that they're doing great post-sale follow-up with technical specifications, offers for maintenance, etc. This is one of the reasons that omnichannel is so exciting and so challenging at the same time, is that it's not just making sure the stuff gets there on time. It's making sure that we are providing a consistent total experience for our customers across all these channels. So let's talk about management performance then. We ask, which of the following do you address in your customer criteria? And what you can see at the top there is that most of the times we're still looking at sort of the same things we've always looked at: timeliness, quality, cost, and those are really, really important. But I think some of the other things like supplier corporate governance, access to supplier partnerships and information can be just as important here. And we're not looking at those at the same way that we're looking at the standard measures. This is really important. A majority of organizations have most of their suppliers aligned with their improvements, with their improvement methodologies. And that's really important because what we're seeing now is that the companies who are doing great things across the board, but especially in supply chain management with omnichannel, are the ones who are making a real effort to take whatever they're doing internally that is working well and expand and partner with all of their supply and value chain partners to make sure that work. And you can see here that you've got 22% who say all suppliers are, but you've got another 50% who say most are. You can take a look over here at we just wanted to find out how big these supply chains are. Median was 50 suppliers, 80% delivered by about 30% of suppliers, and about 5% of suppliers replaced within the last year. Again, we've got pretty okay numbers on supplier performances, things like vendor fill rate, on-time delivery, supplier product rejected. You can take a look at the medians there. One of the reasons we like to include the average is when you see the median, when you see the average, then you can see how bad maybe some people are doing, because if you've got a median of 80%, but the average is 70%, that means some people are doing really, really poorly at the vendor fill rate. Supplier lead times are typically 2 weeks. Typically takes 30 days to certify a new supplier and begin receiving shipments. We move on to costs here. And what we see is that significant investments among firms working on omnichannel tend to be focused on operations and technology. It tends to be on the equipment or on enterprise information technology, something like ERP, operations software. So that seems to be where the investment is being made. And people are making big investments. We ask, what were the following investments as a percentage of overall sales? And you can see IT at the median was 10%, equipment and facilities 10%, and logistics and transportation equipment 8%. These are big numbers. Taking a look at cash-to-cash components, average time to collect accounts receivable, 30 days at the median, 30 days to fulfill accounts payable. So people are keeping their cash-to-cash cycle and accounts payable, accounts receivable balanced out. We ask about price changes for products and for prices of things from suppliers. Both of those are going up. You can see roughly comparable. Supplier price changes maybe a little bit higher than the pricing power of the people sending out to their customers. And for this group, COGS, cost of goods sold, accounts for about 1/3 of sales. And again, once again, the median numbers there are the ones we like to focus on. The averages do give you a sense of maybe how badly some people are doing at this point. Did find that there are a number of organizations that are not meeting quality specs. And these numbers are not great. Scrap or rework, we at the median saw 5%, average 8%. At the median, 4% for return goods and warranty costs, and the average there 6%. So when we talk about information at these folks and IT and some technologies, we found that most organizations are using big data in at least some of their departments and some of their functions. You can see, though, you've got 1/3 there who say they're not using big data at all. You've got another almost 1/3 saying that some are using it. There's a minority up at the top there where they have either most or all departments using big data. This is clearly an opportunity. This is clearly, I don't know how you're going to, over the long run, have a successful omni-channel strategy if you don't have some sort of analytics or big data capability. We also have 1/3 of organizations have yet to apply artificial intelligence to their supply chain management. And we ask how people are using it. And people, we've got, that huge line there at the bottom where about, close to 35% who said we're not using it at all. You can see the ways other people are using it for sales forecasts, which is incredibly important because if you're trying to do omni-channel, obviously supply chain management, obviously inventory levels and demand management are really important to make sure you're not killing yourself financially. Optimizing logistics, pricing, category management, all those AI can be an enormous help for. And then when we talk about other technologies, one of the things we're not seeing as much of is things like the Internet of Things, et cetera. And we're starting to see some really interesting uses of technologies that maybe are not as prevalent as they should be in managing this. For example, you know, Internet of Things, we tend to think of that as sensors on machines or an RFID tag. And yet when we look at manufacturers doing this, we're seeing interesting uses like AGCO. This is an agricultural, they make agricultural equipment, you know, tractors, et cetera. Most of these tractors tend to be ordered and are highly customized. What they've done with the Internet of Things is not so much with machinery, although they've done that too, is they've equipped them with Google Glass 2.0. This is the Enterprise Edition. And what this means, this is augmented reality, where a worker can look at something and the instructions for each step in making a customized machine appear right on the glasses. This is in comparison to what they used to do. They used to have to walk 50 feet, often up to 50 feet to a laptop to look up each instruction. And they're able to just, by looking at it, say, okay, glass, proceed. It shows them what needs to be done, shows them which part, which bolt needs to be put in, what wrench to use. And the amazing thing about this is it not only improves their process time internally, but it cuts their training for employees from 10 days to 3. We're also maybe not seeing as much in the use of robotics as we want. And that's partly because robotics have been obviously expensive, requires this, but the addition of artificial intelligence is allowing new things. There's a company called Rethink Robotics, and I'm not endorsing anybody, I'm just giving you examples, where they're really working hard on the cobot model, where humans and robots can work side by side. These are their two robots, Baxter and Sawyer. And these robots learn by demonstrating. You literally take that arm and you move it yourself, and with artificial intelligence, the robot learns what it is supposed to do. So there's no complicated programming, et cetera. An employee is able to program the robot by themselves. We're seeing artificial intelligence be used with imaging systems that are driven by computer algorithms that can examine hundreds of different units in seconds, catch production and packing failures early, and some of these systems can even learn, improving detection rates. It can't be overstated what artificial intelligence is going to do for supply chain planning. You know, just in facilities, whether warehouses, factories, et cetera, people are beginning to use artificial intelligence and to create digital twins of their machinery. And digital twin is one that exists in the digital world, where it can be running and you can be testing things on it, and it can essentially tell you when the actual piece of equipment is going to need maintenance, what to do to keep it running. Even more important probably for forecasting, figuring out patterns in demand, whether, you know, across time or across external events, markets, et cetera, which allows you to improve your decision making about how to source, how to staff, what kind of maintenance to do, how to manage energy consumption, and what do you need to do in terms of having cash available or finance. Another thing that we're seeing right now, which is we're not seeing organizations doing this cooperatively manage their supply chains. And again, in the long run, an omni-channel supply chain is not going to work if you aren't running it collaboratively. You see here down at the bottom here in the blue, you've got close to 30% who aren't managing it jointly, have no plans to do so. You got another 20% who are in the planning stage, you know, in the same way many people plan to lose weight in the new year. And then you've got another 19% who say they're beginning. It's only a very small set at the top there of this bar chart where people are already doing cooperative supply chain management. You cannot run an omni-channel supply chain unless you are doing collaboration with partners. And it is key, and we're seeing lots of great experiments. I like to throw in this one in just for fun. This is a public-private thing in Wuppertal, Germany, and it's called the Online City. And they had a whole region of manufacturers, retailers, and logistics providers decided they would partner, and it was facilitated by DHL to figure out how are we going to create an omni-channel experience. And they set up 3 things. They set up the shop station, which is a showroom you're looking at right there, where people could go look at what was being made locally. They have a service station where they centralize delivery and returns processing. And then most importantly of all, they did training for everybody, especially for the retailers who've been brick and mortar, on how to start creating an omni-channel experience. Again, I don't think you're going to set up this in your local community, et cetera, or you're going to get together with local partners. But what it does say is it's a great example of the fact that we can have all the great technologies, all the great practices in the world. if we are not sharing them with our omnichannel partners, we cannot succeed going forward. So what are the key takeaways here? What do we need to learn if we want to make our omnichannel supply chains work? Well, what we found, first of all, is that it looks like these measures, these operational measures, they're pretty good, but there are a lot of organizations that need help. You got 13% of these folks who aren't using lean thinking or lean manufacturing. I don't know how you're going to get better if you're not using some improvement methodology, probably lean or something like it. We've got almost 20% who have product return rates of 10% or higher. That will kill an omni-channel strategy, because if you're paying shipping 2 ways for something you're not making any money on, then that is a way to lose money. We found out, by the way, that those who don't use lean had a return rate of 5% at the median versus just 2% at organizations that have extensive use of lean. This is an example of an improvement methodology making a difference in something you might not have thought it would make a difference on. We found that it's complex because most of the people who are doing this have large supply chains, 50 at the median, 318 average. And we found that a large percentage of suppliers, 30%, account for about 80%. That's probably why we're seeing the level of supply chain alignment that we are seeing, is that when people are concentrating their spend with a limited number of trusted suppliers, they're generally able to then drive alignment with some of their with what they want to do. We found that supplier performances for these folks are generally good, on-time delivery rates of 90% at the median, and yet there are some supply chains that are struggling. We had 17% of these folks tell us that supplier on-time delivery rate was 50% or worse. I'm not sure how you can operate an omni-channel supply chain if you're getting your stuff 50% of the time or worse. That's like worse than flipping a coin on whether it's going to arrive or not. The thing that's really interesting is that those who have done the work, though, to align all or most of their suppliers with their improvement methodologies, their on-time delivery rate was 90% versus 80% for everybody else. Product reject rates were 3.5% versus 5%, and lead days were 10 days versus 20 days. One of the takeaways from this is that it's not just the technology, it's not just the design, it is how much effort do you put into working with, collaborating, training, and aligning with your supply chain. We took a look at a lot of other cost data, investment levels. You know, we see people are putting a lot of money in the supply chain initiatives. We got a lot of data on cost data on products. I would encourage you to take this data and look at your own situation and see how you compare. We also took a look at some of the activities that are necessary for excellence in the future. We just talked about artificial intelligence, big data, and collaboration. We saw winners and losers. We had only 12% of people have actually applied big data across the entire enterprise. And as I mentioned before, we got a third of everybody who doesn't do it at all. But we also found good evidence that if you invest in this, you're going to get your money back. Because almost 80% of the organizations who are investing in supply chain management technologies are also leveraging big data versus just 30% of those who aren't. So the key thing here is to make sure that you are investing in the technologies that are going to make a difference in the future to your supply chain and are going to allow you to have an omni-channel future. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Carolyn because I know we've got some questions out there. And I know we got the first one in here is that, you know, how is omni-channel affected? What does it say? Affected traditional distribution relationships. Well, you know, as I mentioned before, you know, manufacturers are much more reliant on distributors and suppliers than ever before because they have to rely on them to go to market. But it also means that the volume of business that can be done with, you know, specific partners is probably diminished. And if you can ship directly to some customers, that also means your wholesale and retail sales may decline. There's a balance. I think one of the things that is going to be incumbent upon supply chain managers, but also senior executives, is to make sure that you're keeping all of your partners happy in a challenging environment where some of them may feel ignored through no fault of your own. Sorry, Carolyn, that one popped in. I wanted to get that right away.
I understand. John, I'm assuming that, or we have had a question about getting a copy of this presentation. This presentation will be available. There will actually be a link with the audio version that will be sent out to all the participants, and it will be available on the APICS website as well. Are there any other questions at this time for John?
I love it when I answer every question with the presentation itself. So, but certainly my email's up there. If somebody has a question, Carolyn, I know they can email you or they can email me afterward, and we will be happy to answer it for them.
Certainly, certainly. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending the webinar this afternoon. John, I especially want to thank you for the details that you presented. They were certainly eye-opening to me. There was some information in there that almost was a bit scary, but it certainly looks like we are moving more towards out of the traditional supply chain and more into an omni-channel relationship, as most of us know. If you have any questions after the broadcast, as mentioned, John can present. You can send them directly to John, or you may send them to me, and I will make certain that we get an answer. All right, and with that, we're going to close the webinar for this afternoon. We hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and we look forward to hearing from you again. And please be on the lookout for new and exciting webinars coming out from APICS shortly.